Today I'm making another recipe that I have wanted to make for even longer than the recipe I made last time, and that is malasadas. Now, if you are unaware, malasadas are a fried dough or a donut that is what I thought just a Portuguese thing, but it actually happens to be very specifically tied to the Azores. And the Azores are an island on the coast of Portugal, and that actually happens to be where my great grandfather came from before he came to the United States. And I did not know my great grandfather, but um, we do know my mom often, especially in March when our town would go very excited for the St. Patrick's Day festivities, often make sure to remind us that we were also of Portuguese ancestry. And so the reason I have always considered the reason this time of year I think of malasadas is also because of my hometown. Now, I grew up Catholic. I often, when I'm thinking about my tarot practice and my witchy witchcraft type practice, the fact that I have a practice that is very much steeped in ritual, I often accredit that to the fact that I grew up Catholic, even though no longer do I consider myself a member of the Catholic Church. And this time of year, I happen to be recording this. I happen to be recording this in early February. This time of year is when Lent starts normally. And so we have Fat Tuesday coming up. So that means that it is a time of when I think of when I was growing up, my mom would always go near her work. There was a Catholic church that did a fundraiser because their congregants, their the people who attended that church tended to be of Portuguese ancestry. And so on Fat Tuesday every year, they did fundraiser where they made malasadas and sold them. So she would always go over to the church and pick up a whole bunch of malasadas, both for her coworkers to eat and for then to bring home to us. And it reminds me now that I am no longer in that area, it reminds me of that whenever Fat Tuesday comes around, and I wish that I could have malasadas. And so I decided that this year, for my February new recipe to try, I was going to make sure that malasadas were on the list. Now, when I think of malasadas, I'm thinking of tradition, right? I'm thinking of what I grew up with. And the tarot card that makes me think the most in this space, this idea, is the Hierophant, which I talked a little bit about last time because we talked about the passion and the roses on the people who are sitting and learning from the Hierophant. And that brings up more of the idea of like, okay, but what is the Hierophant themselves doing? And so the Hierophant is the card of tradition and esoteric learning, which then works right into the fact that I think of these very much in mix with Lent, right? The Catholic Church event, which is 40 days. It's the day before. You have 40 days of considering, right? It's a time of reflection. Um, and normally the reason why you have the Fat Tuesday situation, right, is because you have one last day of partying, of being excited, of indulging before you then embark on 40 days of reflection and restriction and allowing yourself other options, right? Understanding why we're moving into the season we're moving. And so the Hierophant is the person who holds the traditions, who learns about them, who understands why the traditions occur. They're the ones who really get to see and want to dig deep behind and beneath what everyone just does anyway. Okay. So, like, people have traditions and they know that they're doing the traditions, but they don't always understand why they're doing the tradition. And the Hierophant spends their time actually learning and understanding why and digging into those traditions so that they can then share that information with the people who are curious for it, the people who are longing for it. And sometimes they share the traditions and people don't want to go deeper into the why and the understanding of how and why it came to be about and what it all means, right? But there are people who do want to learn from the Hierophant, to go deeper. And so when the Hierophant shows up, they are the card of traditions and the card of wisdom and the card of being able to share. Now, when I was first learning tarot, um, I was very excited to learn that people can find out what their soul card is. And the idea of a soul card is using numerology to find out which major arcana card uh, you are tied to. And it's the idea of you have lessons to learn from this card and you have things that you excel at because of this card, that kind of thing. And I'll put a link to a blog post I have that goes deep into soul cards and how to calculate yours. I found out my soul card was the Hierophant. And when I first started learning 10 years ago, I didn't know what to make of that. Because the Hierophant is definitely modeled after what would consider the Pope. It's modeled after a church that I wasn't sure I had no longer been a part of for a few years at that point, and a lot of this esoteric information ties into religion, and so I wasn't sure how I felt about that. And there is a lot of times when people don't understand, um, it gets or if things aren't updated, then people start fear mongering around certain cards. And the Hierophant is definitely one of those. Because when you think about it, the church is not always, it does not always feel like they're the most free flowing with their information. And so the idea of the fear of the Hierophant is somebody who gatekeeps, someone who chooses not to share their wisdom with others. And so when I first started looking into the Hierophant and what the Hierophant meant and what it meant for me to be the Hierophant, right? I started off a little worried. Like, oh, what does it mean that I'm this gatekeeping knowledge wisdom holder, right? Oh, why am I going to be this person who can't share with others? But the more I dug into it, the more I realized it's actually kind of the opposite. The Hierophant card, you can see at the bottom beneath where the Hierophant sits, he has a pair of keys sitting there. And those keys are actually available to the people that they're teaching, those two disciples that are in front of them. And so I think sometimes then people worry like, oh, Well, then that information's only available for those who are willing to sit at his feet. But isn't that what we do with teachers? We choose to go learn from someone. And so, with the Hierophant being my soul card, eventually I realized, oh, okay, this is not that I am supposed to keep information from other people. This instead is that I get to be somebody who learns, who dives deep into understanding different topics, different things, different traditions. And then I get to share those traditions with others. I get to be the one to share. And the thing about teachers is that everybody learns in a different way from a different teacher in a different style. My style of tarot and of teaching may not be right for everyone. And so they're not going to be the ones to sit with me and learn from me. And so when the Hierophant comes up, even if it's not your soul card, it's often a reminder that we all have things that we get to teach others, right? So the entirety of the major arcana are lessons for all of us, right? It's just when we come to soul cards, it's kind of like, oh, this is your key lesson. This is a thing you're going to be faced with all of your life. And so I find that very interesting, and very much it helped me once I paused and I thought about the things that I enjoy doing and the things that I gravitate towards. It totally made sense that the Hierophant was my card. And that's why I love talking about it so much too, is because I want people to realize that everybody gets to be a teacher in their own way, in their own right. They have things that they learn and they enjoy talking about that they could talk about for hours if people let them, right? So we all get to carry that knowledge and wisdom of traditions with us. And then it's also a good reminder that sometimes the tradition is outdated. And it's time to make a change. It's time to approach things in a different way. It's time to actually share it in a way that now is in alignment. And so the Hierophant, if we're looking at the long term, also is very much about that, about being the person who brings the tradition into the new spaces, into the new way of life, into the new things, and how does it work in this current moment? Because if our traditions don't adapt with us, if we don't understand the root of them, and then we don't understand how to adapt them to the now, both of those things combined help make sure that we're actually honoring the tradition and keeping it going in the way that's right for us. Okay. Now, this malasada dough is massaged, it is mixed, it is got its gluten started, and so this gets to sit and rest. So I'll be back in a little bit and we'll keep going. And we're back. Now, I went a little bit off recipe, which sometimes happens because, life. Um, Technically, the dough's only supposed to rise on the counter for like 2 hours, and then it was supposed to do this next step. I instead stuck it in the fridge and let it do a really slow rise over the evening. So it still rose the amount that it was supposed to rise. I just knew that I was not going to get back to it yesterday. So we're on a new day back talking about tarot and making Malasadas, which you probably would have known just based on what I'm wearing that it was a different day. I like to give disclosure, you know. So, what did I talk about yesterday? Yesterday, I talked a lot about the Hierophant and how Malasadas are tied to history for me, right? Tradition. But there's another reason why I like to make malasadas today. So the first was the fact that Fat Tuesday is coming up and it made me think of them. The second one is that when I started dating my husband, um, I've always been a Valentine's Day fan, right? And Valentine's Day has always been one of my favorite things. Um, and so when I started dating my husband, a number of years ago. um, we when we started dating, it wasn't we hadn't talked about Valentine's Day, and Valentine's Day came around, and I told him it wasn't a big deal because it's not, but I do love Valentine's Day, and I love sharing love. I love love. Okay. And so I know that there's a big commercial aspect of Valentine's Day, but for me, Valentine's Day was the opportunity for me to unabashedly show my love and care because it happened to be what was going on right now, right? It is expected. It's okay. It's normal. And I love the fact that I get to have a day where I get to share love with others. So I told him that I really enjoyed Valentine's Day and that we didn't have to do anything big and special, but I wanted to do something special for him. And one of the things that he really loves, one of his favorite foods, is donuts. And so that very first Valentine's Day and most Valentine's Day since, there have been a few times in between where things have just been a little hectic. But I have made Valentine's Day donuts most Valentines that we've been together. And so making this right before Valentine's Day, when I'm recording this, absolutely 100% made the most sense to me because it gave me an opportunity to try a new type of donut I had not made personally before. And so that is why the other reason why I'm trying to make sure that I've made these malasadas here in February for my recipe of the month. Now, these probably should have sat out a little bit longer, but what I'm doing right now is I'm stretching the dough out and then I will let it sit and we'll come back again and make sure that it has risen enough. But the thing that I like to think about when it comes to tarot and love is obviously the lovers, right? There is a card actually entitled in the Major Arcana, the lovers card. Now, thing about the lovers though, and the thing about the way I read tarot is I don't necessarily look at the lovers card and automatically assume it means the love you have between somebody else. The lovers card for me is very much about values and making sure that you are in alignment with your values. And so that is really important for me when it comes to aligning with a partner. And that is why there are two people on the lovers card, right? It's a depiction of essentially Adam and Eve. And in conversations with one of my favorite people to talk about tarot with, um, and it's in an old podcast, I think, that's still floating around, podcast episode when we did podcasting together. But the thing is, original depictions of the tarot actually showed a third person on the lovers card. And so Adam, the lovers depict Adam and Eve, right? And Adam had to choose which path he was going to go. And so while that is not really depicted on nowadays tarot decks, right? It's a very important way that it has shaped how I look at the lovers card because it's about what values are you willing to walk through the world with? What values are you taking forward? What path are you going to be taking? Where are you going with this, right? And with the depiction of two people, it's the choice to make that decision together, right? To find somebody or even just be with yourself in alignment with your own values so that you can then be out in the world. So, like I talked about soul card for me with the Hierophant being my soul card. If you have the soul card of the lovers, it tends to be that your lessons are very much around making sure you're doing work in alignment with your values and making sure you're sharing your values with others so that they can be a part of it And it can take a lot of reckoning to make sure, because sometimes when our values are very strong and they seem different than those around us, it can be really hard to feel confident and sure of ourselves and our values. And so it's a constant work to make sure that we are, in fact, feeling our values and feeling in them. And so when we think about all of the ways that we are the tarot, we battle with that no matter what. It is something to pay attention to. And so it's something just to think about as we are in a time of love, in any time, is to think about how the Lover's card represents your values, and how do you stand in your values, and what path are you willing to take for your values. So this needs to rise a little bit more. I will be back, and then we'll get to the point where we get to fry some dough. So pause, and we'll come back. Welcome to my stove. It is now time to fry donuts. Though I'm not gonna lie to you, I might be rushing this process just a little bit so I can get recorded. These have not quite risen as much as I was hoping them to rise in this amount of time. So the great thing about this is that I'm trying new things, right? I'm excited to try new things and record for you and talk about tarot. If this does not work out, I will let these rise even more, and I will fry later, and I will let you know how they go. But let's start with just frying these. Now, my temperature needs to get a little bit higher up, so the next step was cutting these into some smaller pieces, tying them up with your hands so we can fry these. The thing that I love about frying dough is A, it's tasty, but B, it seems like every culture has some sort of fried dough, and that's amazing. And I think it's a really fun idea to kind of look at the different ways different cultures fry dough and eat it, but you can pretty much always find a sweet fried dough somewhere. It's a lot of fun. And so when I went to Hawaii for the first time, I found out that malasadas were a staple in Hawaii as well due to immigration. Um, and they've done their own spin on it in Hawaii, and they were slightly different than what I had growing up when my mom would get them from the local church. But it was really cool to see the differences between them. And like I said, I have fried donuts for at least 13 years now. So this is not a new concept for me. I've got my oil pretty much at temperature. I've got our dough. Let's fry. Let's see what happens. These are gorgeous. I will say that. I'm not quite sure they're as fluffy as I'd like them to be. Let's hope these drained. And then we'll get them drained, and then I'm gonna dip them in cinnamon sugar. You see how they come out, and if it's worth frying the rest of them right now, or if we gotta wait just a little bit longer, which, not a bad thing. Hold on. That's right. Cinnamon. Cinnamon and sugar. That is what we coat our malasadas in. She'll let a little more oil on there, apparently. There we go. That's what I like to see. Let's try them out. Definitely denser than they should be. So I am back. And like I said in my earlier segment, the first batch did not quite go exactly as planned. And that happens. That's the beauty of trying a new recipe. So this time around, I am going to use the stand mixer. I already have some other things prepped. Um, I'll record some along the way. But I really feel like this is very much fitting for life. And the idea that, like, we learn and then we have to start again. It kind of makes me think of the pages. So in tarot, you have your base numbers 1 through 10, and then you have the court cards in all of the minor arcana. And so this means that there's similar themes across any card that is a 1, any card that's a 2, any card that's a 3, all have very similar themes based on numerology. And then the court cards, same thing. So when we look at the pages in tarot, they come after we've done a full cycle. So we get 1 through 10, and then we come to the page. Now, the page is somebody who's willing to learn. It's someone who's willing to try things in a different way. And so I bake all the time, but I still am willing to learn new recipes. And then I'm willing to admit that a recipe didn't turn out okay, and I want to try it again. So things I noticed in my first recipe. 1, it said that the dough was supposed to be tacky. It was not tacky when I got to the point where I was kneading it. So I'm going to use the stand mixer this time around, and I'm going to really pay attention to how much flour I put in. So that's one thing I'm going to do different. Second thing is I'm doing it all in one day. We're not doing an overnight rise. We're just going to do the 2 hours, let it rise for the 2 hours, and then spread it all out, and then let it rise for 2 hours, and then fry it. So again, might not be able to record all of it as people are coming in and out of my house throughout the day, but I'm at least going to start recording some of the differences so that we can see how it goes. And then hopefully we'll have some nice fluffy malasadas at the end, just in time for Fat Tuesday, which is tomorrow, as I'm recording this, instead of having some very dense ones. So I've got my warmed up milk, I've got my sugar in the bowl, I've got my eggs that are going to go in it, I've got yeast to add to it after that. So I'm going to get going on this, and I'll keep checking in with you along the way. Okay, this second round is already looking much better. A little bit tacky, a little bit softer, so not entirely sure what I did wrong the first time, but the stand mixer and the second round is doing much better. So this is going to sit, and then I'll be back as I massage it all out, and then we'll fry it. We're looking better. Malasadas, I've got high hopes for this second batch. Okay, I am back, and this is the second round of malasada dough, and it looks much better than the first round. It is much fluffier. Oh yeah, that looks fantastic. So we're gonna fry some of these up now. Well, compared to last time, these look much more like they're supposed to look. I now have some fluffy, delicious looking malasadas. And I will say that I've already tried one, but I'll try one on camera too. Oh, yeah, see? That's what the inside's supposed to look like. Tastes like tradition. Well, it took me 2 tries, but I am now successful in trying to make malasadas for the very first time. And now I have a tradition that I can carry on just from the comfort of my own home. So I'm very excited about this. Thank you for following along, and I can't wait to have you in my kitchen next time as we talk more tarot and inner wisdom. Bye for now.